You're listening to the Fan2Fan Podcast, Episode 2. Hey, you're listening to the Fan2Fan Podcast. This is your host, Bernie Gonzalez, and I am here with my friend, Andre Walker.
What's up, B?
So, we are here today talking about the Marvel Cinematic Universe. We kind of wanted to go over Marvel's cinematic history. It is quite long, well before what we know it to be now. So just kind of a bit of a rundown for those that only know Robert Downey Jr. as Iron Man and Chris Evans as Captain America. In 1944, yes, we're going to go that far back, we have a 15-part Captain America serial. So a serial was released in theaters, few parts, every few weeks, and it would really draw kids back into the theater to watch it. And it makes sense from the era of pulp serials. Captain America would be the title that they go out with. Then many years later, 30 plus years later, Spiderman is released in 1977. Doctor Strange is released in 1978. Captain America and Captain America 2 as movies are released in 1979. So all of those are really more like TV ventures. And then you have the first real Marvel movie, which is Howard the Duck in 1986. Dre, do you remember Howard the Duck?
Yes, I do remember Howard the Duck. Some of these movies here, like you mentioned, those movies in the 70s, they were horrible movies.
They were bad.
They were really bad.
Yeah. But
I was a kid when those movies came out, believe it or not. I love those movies when they came out. So they have a special place in my heart, as does Howard the Duck. I know Howard the Duck is a horrible movie. I know it's not supposed to be liked. I know it's one of the biggest bombs of George Lucas's career. But I was a kid when I saw it. It's got a talking duck in it. It's got aliens. What's not to like at the time when you're a kid? I didn't go to the theater to see it, but when I saw it on cable TV, I actually liked the movie, and it's got a little special place in my heart for the movie. So
I did not see it, and a lot of these movies, as we talked before, 80s movies are kind of, I guess like any era, they are a product of their time.
Yes.
If you did not see, and let's get away from Howard the Duck, if you did not see Porky's when it came out, you probably don't get Porky's. If you didn't see Bachelor Party when it first came out, one of your favorite movies,
yes,
I tried watching it.
No.
It was not a good idea.
Yeah, but plus you don't have a sense of humor.
Haha. Howard the Duck, 1986. If you probably didn't see it in that time, you don't get it. And I do remember not too long ago, was it maybe 2 years ago, we went with our friend Chris to a small theater in Chicago, and he is a big Jaws fan.
Yeah.
And this theater was playing a number of different, just kind of classic movies. And we were going there to see Jaws in the big screen. Might have been before the 20th anniversary or something like that. Nonetheless, so we go to the theater to see Jaws, and theater's kind of packed. There's a few seats there, and they're already playing a movie because we're only there to see Jaws. And what's the movie that's on?
Howard the Duck.
Howard the Duck. That was actually the first time I had ever seen a little bit of Howard the Duck. Yeah, it was kind of brutal. So I saw maybe like the last half an hour. And it's interesting because my nephew now has a love for Howard the Duck. So I've actually seen it a few more times.
The original movie, Howard the Duck?
The original movie, Howard the Duck. So I've seen it because of him. Saw it on demand not too long ago. So I've probably seen it over the last 6-7 months, about maybe 2-3 total times. So not something I remember. I'm already willing to forget.
I mean, it's a stupid movie with a talking duck and a principal from Ferris Bueller and a mom from Back to the Future.
Tim Robbins.
I mean, Tim Robbins is in it.
There's a hand glider. Not a hand glider. It's a motorized glider from like the A-Team episodes.
But, I mean, back when I was, like I said, I was a kid when I saw it. I grew up, and I see it on cable now, like, oh, Howard the Duck's on. Well, most people look at Howard the Duck like, oh my God, Howard the Duck, what a horrible movie. Like, I saw it was a kid. I liked the movie. I can't help it.
Yeah, and it also didn't help. George Lucas.
Yes.
Nice little connection to Lucasfilm. Yeah. So I guess the one good thing that all that became eventually Pixar animation.
Yeah.
So Howard the Duck comes from a good place somewhere. So beyond Howard the Duck, you got The Incredible Hulk Returns, 1998, along with The Trial of the Incredible Hulk in 1989. Lou Ferrigno Hulks.
Yes.
Special place in our heart for David Banner. I did not know. Did you know he was named David Banner? Where obviously in the comics we know him as Bruce, but they thought that Bruce was too feminine of a name. Interesting, huh?
I did hear that. I forget the guy's name. Kenneth Johnson, I want to say. He's the producer of the Incredible Hulk television series. And he stated that he didn't like the name Bruce. He thought Bruce was too feminine for whatever reason. I don't think he ever saw Batman. I don't think he knew about Batman, but he thought Bruce was too feminine, so he changed the name to David and made Bruce his middle name. So it was funny. It was funny because I was a comic book fan and I always knew him as Bruce Banner, and I never could understand why they would keep calling him David. And so it was always confusing until later on when the internet came out and I researched it and found out that's why he called David Bruce Banner.
There you go. And 1989 rolls around again, and not only do we have the trial of the Incredible Hulk, we have The Punisher with Dolph Lundgren. Did you know he did a lot of his own stunts? Changed the dialogue so it would make it easier for him to say with the thick Russian. I believe it's Russian accent. I'm not sure.
I think he's Austrian.
It might be Austrian. There you go. That makes more sense. Do you remember The Punisher?
I remember the movie. I remember going to the video store and renting it because it wasn't playing. It was a really small, limited release, and it came out. I couldn't find it anywhere. And I remember renting it at the local video store by my house, and running home to try to watch it because I'm a huge fan of The Punisher. And I remember like the first 2 minutes of it, I was like, "Oh, this isn't too bad." He's taking out a bunch of mafia guys. And then I remember there was a scene where he dropped down to his knee to try to do something, and in his boot he had a silver knife in his boot, and it had a little skull on it. And I was like, "Oh, that's kind of cool." And I didn't realize that was the closest thing you were going to see to the skull on his chest in the entire movie. That he never wore a skull on his chest.
Not a skull on his chest.
Not a skull. He had the black.
Not a skull on his jacket.
No,
not a skull on his motorcycle.
He didn't have
helmet?
a leather jacket.
Did he have a skull on the hilt of his gun?
He lived in a sewer like the Ninja Turtles. He drove through the sewers, the grounds of the city. It was just this weird type of movie. It's funny. I remember with this movie and probably another movie we're going to bring up later on that these movies came out at the time of VHS. And I remember that I had 2 VHSs. And I actually edited both movies. I recorded the movie and I edited out all the stuff I didn't like, and I put it together the stuff I did like. So that's
a fan right there.
I turned an hour and a half Punisher movie into 40 minutes.
A nice short film.
Yeah. So
a nice Punisher short film.
Nice short Punisher movie. With the stuff that I actually liked, the part at the beginning, there was a part in the middle where he had a fight with a couple of thugs in the amusement park, which actually was pretty cool. There was a couple of scenes in there that I thought was like, okay, that's straight Punisher. And then he had a fight scene at the end where he fought some geisha ninja women things, whatever. And I kind of crammed that all together into a 30-minute movie. And it was that was the closest thing I could get to a really good Punisher movie. And it was pretty sad, but yeah, like you said, I was a true fan. Your fan edit of the Punisher. I was doing fan edits before
fan edits
forget
existed.
PC, forget Mac. I was doing it on VHS.
Old school. Very nice. Captain America comes out 1990.
And
so
that is the other movie.
So we know Chris Evans is Steve Rogers now / Captain America, but actually Dolph Lundgren and Arnold Schwarzenegger were both up for the role of Captain America. And if you look by the movie poster, it says coming spring to theaters everywhere. By theaters everywhere, it means internationally because it was actually never released in the U.S. So kind of interesting that of all the movies that doesn't get a U.S. release, it's the symbol of U.S. patriotism. Yeah. Captain America.
Yeah. I actually, that was the second movie I did the fan edit with. I actually edited the very beginning, which was pretty decent for what it was at the time with the Captain America and his standoff with the Red Skull. And I actually cut out everything in the middle. And then the last fight scene with him and the Red Skull, and I edited together for another Andre Walker special fan edit of the Captain America movie. Which was funny because I remember at the time when they did the movie, that's when they made the Red Skull actually have the super soldier serum. He was actually the Nazis' attempt at trying to duplicate the Captain America super soldier serum.
That's right.
And they actually put it in the modern day Captain America movie because the original Red Skull in the comics, he wasn't a super soldier. He was just a guy who Adolf Hitler influenced, and he became the new face of the Nazi party. But it was funny that that storyline from the old, really crappy Captain America movie actually translated to the modern day Captain America movie, where they actually gave Red Skull super soldier serum. And I remember watching the new modern Captain America movie, like, wow, they actually took something from that old movie. Okay,
there was something to take.
It was something. It actually made sense to give Captain America somebody who could fight physically. It was sort of like what people always talk about with Batman and Joker. Like, Batman, if ever fought the Joker, he'd kill him with one punch. So to give Captain Red Skull a reason to be able to go total mano a mano with Captain America, to make him sort of a, bastard version of the super soldier serum, and that's what kind of screwed up his face. And that actually was the same storyline that they used in the modern movie, that the super soldier serum that the Nazis created screwed up Captain America's face. But in the modern Captain America movie, it was a skull.
Screwed up Red Skull's face.
The Red Skull's face was a skull. And in the original Captain America, I don't know what the heck his face was.
No.
It was red.
And he had this weird Italian
the actor was not German. He was Italian, trying to do a German accent.
I always remember the scene playing the piano in the castle.
Yes.
And just being very, very dramatic, very attempting to be kind of, the super Bond, super villain kind of thing.
The scene of the year of that movie, if you ever want to waste your time watching this movie, there's a scene where Captain America throws his shield at this, I forget, it's like this tower where these guards are shooting, and it knocks down the tower, and the shield falls down and is buried under the stuff under the tower. And then you see like a bad visual effect of the shield coming back around, like it's coming back in his hands, like, there's the shield down there buried under all that debris. And you see the shield sort of come back out, and I'm like, wow, this is so bad.
So the big question, did that make it into your fan edit?
That actually made it into my fan edit. It was decent enough where I was like, I can't cut that out as part of the part of the movie that I actually like. So that actually made it into my fan edit. So unfortunately, yes, it did make it in there.
Unfortunately made was Fantastic Four in 1994.
Now that movie's funny. I didn't see that movie for a long, long time.
This is one of those movies that I have to say, like, all things being equal, I saw it from a bootleg at a con. Yeah. You're going through some of the different.
I think we saw it together.
That's when we saw it. Together. And it was New Horizons that made it, and they had the rights to the Fantastic Four that they'd licensed from Marvel, and they were going to lose the rights. So they quickly put together this film. I don't think, at least kind of looking at some of the background for it, the actors and the crew didn't know that they were kind of doing it not only, I don't want to say on the cheap, because it was multi-million-dollar budget, but nonetheless, that they were making it
was made on the cheap. You can say cheap.
Oh no, it was made on the cheap, but they were making the film so that they could keep the rights and do something with it. And a lot of that money was spent on the Thing's costume anyway. Yeah. But this movie is kind of like to say it's a cult classic.
Yeah. It could be offensive to cult classic.
Yes. Because when you think cult classic, you think maybe Escape from LA. You think They Live. Yeah. I don't know that I would put the New Horizons version of Fantastic Four in this, but when you talk about the Fantastic Four, it comes up in the conversation.
I mean, Roger Corman, is everybody who may or may not know, is a classic B-movie legend.
Yes, discovered many directors, including James Cameron, actors.
He is a legend, and he got the rights based off his like long resume of making those classic B movies. Somehow he got to direct. And the sad thing is, he just didn't have the money and he didn't have the talent, but he had the passion to try to do it. It wasn't like if you watch the movie, it's a bad movie. Okay, it's a bad movie, but it's not a bad movie from a guy who just says, the heck with it, I'm going to make a bad movie. He is a guy who, it's sort of like Ed Wood. It's an Ed Wood superhero movie. When we watched it, I was thinking of a guy who he was trying to do the best he could with the budget he had and the knowledge he had of the characters. And it's a bad movie. I'm not apologizing for the movie. It's a bad movie, but it's a bad movie with good intentions. I want to say that counts for something.
They tried, right?
They did try, but it was another one of those Marvel goose eggs that really hurt their brand, because they had not, to that point, they still had not had a hit movie in the modern day cinematic universe.
Exactly. Another not hit movie for them was the 1998 movie Nick Fury, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Now, this is the disclaimer, is that it was broadcast on Fox back on May 26th of 98. It was one of you have to remember, like, this is kind of in a period where heroes are starting to pop on the radar a little bit because they had the Generation X show. Do you remember Nightman?
Yes, I remember.
So you have a little bit of a blip on the radar, but of all the characters, Nick Fury, played by film star, the legend, Don't Hassle the Hoff, David Hasselhoff, is Fury, the retired super spy, and he's trying to take down the terrorist organization
Hydra.
Yep. And they're threatening Manhattan with some sort of the Death's Head virus. And they had a bunch of other actors, completely unmemorable, that were in there. They had a Strucker, but not Baron von Strucker. But it was exactly what you would think it is. It was a made-for-TV movie, and it is exactly what you would imagine it to be.
Yeah, exactly. I remember watching the movie. I barely remember anything about the movie except for that David Hasselhoff was in his long leather sweaty suit that looked so uncomfortable just watching him and hearing you could hear the squeaks of the rubber of him moving around in the suit on the TV. And I remember seeing that and him trying to chew on that cigar and look like he was grizzly and squinting with one eye. It was pretty, from what I remember of the show, of the miniseries or TV series or movie, whatever it was pretty bad. It was hard. And this is for somebody who's I wasn't a Nick Fury fan to begin with. So to do that really made me not want to be a Nick Fury fan. So thank God. Thank you, Samuel Jackson. Thank you, Samuel Jackson.
Yes. Something that you are a fan of is Blade. So it's 1998. We have a whole episode just dedicated to Blade coming up in the next few weeks. So please listen to that one. One of the first modern day superhero films released by New Line, written by or co-written by David Goyer, who eventually would go on to write The Dark Knight, directed by Christopher Nolan. But Blade is released after a few theatrical attempts, a few direct-to-TV attempts, but really Blade is their first success.
Yes. It's pretty remarkable, too, that a major studio like Marvel had not had a huge success in film or television to this point. I mean, the only television show that they had at the time that was success was the Incredible Hulk television series. They had not had a successful movie franchise. They hadn't had a TV series outside Incredible Hulk. Whereas DC is known for, shows like Smallville and Wonder Woman, and they had successful TV shows and movies. I mean, the original 1989 Michael Keaton Batman movie was successful. And who could forget probably the biggest success superhero movie of all time was the original Superman movie. So DC was striking out pretty good. And for like 98, did you say 97, 98?
Blade was 98.
98 for Blade to come out and be Marvel's first success movie tells you a long, long drought. But they did hit it out the park with Blade. They made up for a long time of not having quality with one of the, like we said, the flagship characters for the turning around of superhero movies, superhero franchises. That too. And
this episode is dedicated to Marvel.
Yes.
But you think about DC, they had Batman, Batman Returns, Batman Forever, and Batman Forever was kind of like the first blip that started saying, all right, there are some dings in the armor. And then 1997, a year before Blade, Batman and Robin is released, kind of just bombs the superhero genre to the point that something like Blade almost has to be so detached from the capes.
Exactly.
That's the only way that it will come out. And it also comes out the year after Steel and Spawn. Blade comes out 1998 after a lot of attempts at trying to create a superhero movie that's successful. Just taking a little break from the action to remind you that you can find new episodes and old episodes of the Fan2Fan podcast at www.fanpodcast.com. You'll also find the podcast on Facebook. Just type Fan2Fan Podcast, and on Twitter at Fan2Fan Podcast. Everything is number 2 in between the two fans. I love questions. I love comments. Please leave them. Send them my way.
And now, on with the show.
But then the movie that really starts to kind of dig into more of the superhero genre is in 2000, which is Bryan Singer's X-Men.
Yeah. X-Men was a huge risk for a lot of reasons. I remember that's when I really started to get into researching, and internet was starting to become really big about the movie. And I found out that Originally, Bryan Singer, he wanted a bigger budget. They offered him $60 million to do the X-Men movie, but he needed a bigger budget to try to get the movie done the right way. And Fox wasn't budging. And then what happened was that the movie was originally supposed to come out in Christmas, around the Christmas time, if I remember.
Okay.
And they had another movie, Fox had another movie that they had to drop out of. I think it may have been, what was that movie with Steven Spielberg and Tom Cruise? Minority Report. I think it was Minority Report. Yeah. And Matt Damon was originally supposed to play the Colin Farrell character, but he dropped out for another project, and that was a co-movie. I think that movie was co-produced with Fox and another studio. And since Matt Damon dropped out, they had to go find a new actor to replace him. So they ended up pushing Minority Report to next year. So they went to Bryan Singer and told him, hey, guess what? We're going to give you more money for X-Men. We're going to give you the $75 million that you need to make X-Men. And Bryan Singer said, great. And we're moving a movie from December to June. You're going to replace Minority Report. Oh, crap. So Bryan Singer had to rush. And he had to rush out there, and he had to go out there and really work hard to try to get this movie crammed out in the time frame that Fox had gave him to do the movie. And did a great job. He did a great job. He took some tones with the X-Men movie that people weren't expecting. That opening intro with the concentration camp for a superhero movie still shocks a lot of people that they put that in a superhero movie. And it really set up a franchise, established Hugh Jackman as a new leading man. It was definitely a big shock to see one of Marvel's flagship characters, the X-Men, actually portrayed in a great, humane way.
And speaking of Wolverine, since you mentioned Hugh Jackman, Dougray Scott.
Yes.
Remember, so I think that was Mission Impossible 3, directed by John Woo. 2, was it? Directed by John Woo, where he plays the villain.
Yes.
And if I remember right, as in every single Tom Cruise movie, there are motorcycles, because Tom Cruise loves motorcycles.
Loves them.
And if I remember correctly, there was an accident. Mm-hmm. And this is where Dougray Scott was injured in some capacity.
Yes.
And that prevented him from being Wolverine in the 2000 X-Men movie. So Hugh Jackman comes in, and I mean, it's been 16 years since he's played Wolverine, and he still got supposedly one more. X-Men, first time we see the X-Men characters, because we had the Generation X show that was on TV that used Banshee, if I remember right, the White Queen, a few random characters, but I mean, it's not like they were trying to, they were not picking Cyclops or Wolverine or Jean Grey for that matter, Colossus. They were picking kind of these I hate to say Generation X characters to represent what they thought audiences wanted, especially on TV and especially on Fox, when you're talking about the Aaron Spelling legacy of the Beverly Hills 90210, The Heights, and all these other shows, Melrose Park. So they thought, well, maybe we can kind of put the X-Men in that world.
Yeah, and it was pretty interesting too. After like you said, when Hugh Jackman stepped in as Wolverine, and some of the other casting choices with Halle Berry, with them going with Anna Paquin at the time, and really changing the role characters around from what we knew her from the comic books. They played around with Cyclops and Jean because in the books they're the same age, but in the movie they made Jean Grey older and they made Cyclops a lot younger with James Marsden. James Marsden is Cyclops, and Franco Jensen is Jean Grey.
First time we hear about Ray Parks before he became Darth Maul.
Yeah, Ray Parks starts his career as being badass Mr. Guy when he started doing playing legendary characters like Snake Eyes. He did the first character he did was Toad in the X-Men movie after Darth Maul. And then the two keys to me was getting Patrick Stewart to play Xavier, because when I was growing up, there was this thing called magazines. And there was one magazine called Hero and Wizard. Hero and Wizard. And Hero and Wizard would regularly put in their monthly magazines fan castings. And they would pick a movie and they would cast it. And every year they would do X-Men because X-Men was so big, and they would fan cast X-Men. And they would have every year the cast changed every year from fan favorites. 1 year they have Mel Gibson, they want to play Wolverine. 1 year they have the singer Danzig, they wanted him to play Wolverine. And 1 year they wanted Russell Crowe to play Wolverine. Every year it would change and change and change and change of characters, and Storm would change, and Cyclops would change. For Michael Biehn, who they wanted to play Cyclops, and Iman, they wanted to play Storm. The one constant in every single magazine, Patrick Stewart had to play Charles Xavier.
Earl Grey tea, hot. I mean, I remember watching Star Trek The Next Generation, and it was just like, all right, every time he sat in that chair, you just put some wheels on the side, it's Professor X.
And if you think about it, Star Trek The Next Generation was X-Men. You know, number one was Cyclops, his field officer. Deanna Troi was Jean Grey. She was psychic, telepath. Worf was Wolverine. It's basically Star Trek. So when you see Patrick Stewart sitting in that chair giving orders, it's like, this is the closest thing I'm going to get to an X-Men movie with Patrick Stewart. And when Patrick Stewart's name was, when Bryan Singer showed
but wait, wouldn't Geordie LaForge be Cyclops?
No, that's not how it works.
I'm just saying.
That's not how it works.
He's got the visor.
Maybe if he took the visor from him, he would be Cyclops, but that's not how he was. But it was, and Data was Beast. Data was basically Beast.
Data was Beast.
So
good call. Very nice.
Basically, when Bryan Singer grabbed and cast Patrick Stewart and fulfilled everybody's fan dream of casting him, it was the perfect. It's still right now to me one of the top 5 casting choices out there. It's just like on the nose for an actor in a comic book movie. And the second one was the character that took me the longest to get used to, because I had my own imagination who I wanted to be the character, was Magneto.
Yes.
To me, my favorite supervillain in comic book movies is Doctor Doom. But right behind him, I mean a hair thin behind him, was Magneto. Because Doom was cool because his arrogance is so, I just love his arrogance. I love he thinks he's the greatest thing in the world. Everybody's beneath them. And for the most part, they are. But with Magneto has something special about him. He's not really a villain. In his mind, he's not a villain. He's fighting for his people. So he became a villain who was sympathetic. And since Magneto is a blueprint for a lot of villains in superhero movies today who don't see them as villains.
It's always the flip side. The idea that I think, when they talked about the creation of the X-Men, Stan Lee has said, the whole idea of Martin Luther King on one side and you have Malcolm X on the other.
Exactly.
They both believe in the idea of civil rights. They both believe that it should happen. They just believe in a different way of making it happen. You have Professor X on one side, Magneto on the other. You have Patrick Stewart on one side. You have to have a strong opposite, but someone that is compelling, that you believe can be a counterpart, a peer, a rival to Patrick Stewart. So when they cast Ian McKellen, Bryan Singer just hit it out of the ballpark because he has another actor that can go toe-to-toe with Patrick Stewart, let alone as Professor X. And
originally, I wasn't a big fan of the casting of Ian McKellen. I didn't know his work, really. I didn't know anything about him. I knew he worked with Bryan Singer previously at Apt Pupil.
Yes.
And that's where he got the role, because he played the Nazi in Apt Pupil. And
which is a good cult classic, because it's based on the Stephen King short story released in 1998, same year as Blade. But you've got to see a dark side to Ian McKellen, where he played in that movie. He played older than he was, and I remember I had that same trepidation you did, because I thought he seems like an older actor, but it's because he was playing older and he was doing it so well that made you think, is he going to be the AARP version of Magneto? I don't believe it.
And because if you look in the comic books, Magneto, and the comic books always fool you with this. Magneto is somebody who's supposed to be very old, but he's got abs. You know what I mean? He's supposed to be somebody that's like 60.
Well, it's because they always give him kind of like the white hair. He's got that silver mane where, if you were thinking like an actor now,
at the time, I was thinking of Rutger Hauer. Rutger Hauer was my choice. Yes. So I wanted to play Magneto. He had the look. He didn't, even if they didn't go with the white hair, if they kept his hair blonde, I wouldn't have been mine with Rutger Hauer. So when they cast Ian McKellen, I was so disappointed. He is one of the best villains in a superhero movie ever. Ian McKellen brought humanity to Magneto. He brought regalness to Magneto. I have so much respect. And here's the thing too about Ian McKellen. Ian McKellen at the time was really new to the internet and everything. And he would reach out to fans and he would talk to them. They would have questions about the costume. Is Magneto going to have the helmet? What the costume? And Ian McKellen reached out to fans to talk to fans and ease their concerns. He knew fans weren't too crazy about him being cast as the character. And he would talk to fans and explain to them. So that helped with a lot of other fans. But with me, strictly, his performance was so great that it changed the way I thought about him and Magneto, and actually helped me be excited to see him in the Lord of the Rings movie, which he shot right after the first X-Men movie. So he got to play Gandalf and he got to play Magneto, two of my favorite screen characters of all time. So
it's the character. It's not Ian McKellen, but I will always remember the first 10 minutes of X-Men where they're in the concentration camp.
Exactly.
And I just remember thinking, this is X-Men?
Yes.
This has just a lot of weight to it. You know, it's just all of this is happening. This kid is being dragged away from his parents. And all of a sudden during this incredibly tragic moment, his powers kick in. It's just wow, this is X-Men?
Yes.
And it's okay, you guys got me hook, line, and sinker. So I want to see what happens. So sometimes movies disappointing. You've got Storm with her line.
Yeah, but I think that could be attributed to, like I said, Bryan Singer has always said with the first X-Men movie, he said that the first X-Men movie was a commercial for the sequel because X-Men 2 improved on everything that was wrong with X-Men. So if you look at Bryan Singer, a guy who had to rush up his timetable. He had to cast very quickly. He had to shoot it very quickly to meet this deadline. And for what he shot a pretty solid movie for what he got out of the movie. It's still a solid movie. It could have been a lot better had Fox given him more time. But for what it was, it was a huge hit and a lot of fans liked it and they respected that at least there was this attempt to try to tell a darker, more serious story and not just let's put guys in costumes and just have a fight. He did try to tell a serious story, and Patrick Stewart and Ian McKellen's relationship as friends, even though they weren't on screen that much, it was very powerful. That scene at the end has become kind of iconic with the X-Men franchise, with them playing chess. They've been using it
in the bubble plastic cage.
Yeah, they've been using that scene of them playing chess in certain other movies to show that how much they have respect for each other and how much they were friends and everything. So the movie got a lot they got a lot more right than they got wrong. There was a lot of wrong with Storm's wig and her bad accent and stuff, but they got a lot of stuff right in that movie too. So that was a big step forward in the cinematic universe for Marvel.
2002, Blade 2 comes out.
Yeah.
So again, we talked about Blade in the last movie. We really just talked about Blade as the first one. Blade 2. Originally, it was supposed to be Morbius, the vampire, who was supposed to be the villain, but that did not happen. Blade 2, on my end, it's not a memorable movie, but it's memorable in the sense that it was another installment to showcase Guillermo del Toro's talent.
Yeah.
And he wound up doing a lot of other films, including Hellboy 2, Pan's Labyrinth. But it was interesting to see him take on what was Marvel's first supernatural horror superhero.
And I actually did think he did a solid job. Blade, I would consider, with sequels some sequels are always a bigger disappointment than the first one. I actually enjoyed the second Blade. I didn't enjoy as much as the first one, but I actually enjoyed the second Blade movie. I think they got a lot of things right. One of the things I think Guillermo did actually I like more in the second Blade movie than the actual original Blade movie. In the original Blade movie, Blade was trying to find a cure for his vampirism. But in the second one, Guillermo del Toro decided to say, why would he want a cure? I'm cool. I got these powers. I can fight. I'm super strength,
speed. So I can go into daylight.
Exactly. So he made Blade more. It wasn't so much about Blade trying to find his cure. He wasn't this depressing character. He was just trying to do good. And he kind of accepted the fact that he was this vampire and he had these abilities. And he kind of made Blade not a lighter character, but Blade wasn't dreading the fact that he was a vampire. It was more about the story and Blade trying to stop the bad guy than Blade sort of sitting back, trying to drown his sorrows about how woe is me. So that was one thing that got right with the movie. And I also did like the villain. I think the villain in the movie was Luke Gross, who previously did he was a Canadian or Austrian musician. I think he was a musician. He had never had any he was a pop star. And he never had any big acting experience, but I thought his portrayal of Nomak was great. I loved this Nomak before. His vampire was very regal, very distinguished. He had it's sort of similar to Patrick Stewart's Magneto. He brought a lot of regalness.
Professor X.
I'm sorry. Ian McKellen's Magneto. I'm sorry.
Oh, there you go.
Stumbling.
Okay,
That's
gotcha.
what happens when you don't have enough sleep. But Ian McKellen's Magneto, he was regal. He had a lot of mythos to him. And he was a sympathetic villain, too, because his father experimented on him. So he wasn't really a bad guy. He just wanted to take out his father for what he did to him. So he did a good job. And Luke Gross went on to work with
Guillermo del Toro again.
In the Hellboy sequel, where he played another great villain who was very cool. I really liked. And I would like to see Luke Gross get some more roles than that because he's a really cool villain. But Blade 2 was one of those sequels that maybe not as good as the original, but still a solid sequel nevertheless.
Is G.I. Joe preventing your plan for world domination? Are elite covert special mission units operating under the control of the United States military causing you headaches? Then it's time for a vacation. Yay! Forget all the usual destinations and book your flight today to Cobra La. Woo! Neighbor to Shangri-La and the mystical city of Kowloon, Cobra La sits in a picturesque valley hidden in the Himalayas. But unlike traditional, boring resort towns, our ancient city is comprised of crustacean and anthropoid architecture. Your living space will be as alive as your nightlife. You'll start your day by meeting our supreme leader, Globulus. The last of the Serpent Kings, Globulus will take you down our crab shell-lined main street and show you around our lovely town, highlighting the glorious prehistoric sites, including Nemesis Enforcer's Zipline Odyssey, Pythona's Pork Palace, home to the best pulled pork barbecue in the Northern Hemisphere, Cobra La's world-famous giant insect petting zoo featuring family-friendly fungazoid fun, and don't miss the Royal Guard Parade every day at noon and 6. There's something at Cobra La for everyone. History buffs will enjoy our Web of Remembrance tour, and nature lovers can hike through our Venus flytrap forest. And coming in 2017, Spore rocket races. Yay! Don't let the time worm pass you by. Book your vacation at Cobra La today. Cobra la 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 la.
2002 also brings us Spider-Man from Sony, starring Tobey Maguire, directed by Sam Raimi, who was better known at the time from the Evil Dead series. So Evil Dead 2, Army of Darkness.
Mm-hmm. He's a producer on Xena, Hercules.
Yeah. I don't remember if he had directed his movie A Simple Plan with Billy Bob Thornton before Spider-Man or maybe right after.
I think he maybe directed it before and it came out around the same time. You know, one of those things that came out similar to the same time.
But I mean, his at that time, he was known for the Evil Dead movies.
Yeah.
So to have this very kinetic, I mean, if you've seen them and if you're listening to this podcast, yes, you've probably seen them, let alone own them. Mm-hmm. Very kinetic, camera's always moving. Mm-hmm. There's this weird combination of like Three Stooges with this kind of like, I don't know, just hyper, like camera on ADD sometimes. So after being in basically development hell for so many years. So Spider-Man eventually gets a theatrical release, but not just a theatrical release. I mean, they are starting a whole new, what they hope is a franchise of a tentpole character for Marvel.
Yeah. The character was in development hell since, like I said, back in the 90s. I remember reading those same magazines I talked about earlier where they were talking about fan casting Leonardo DiCaprio as, Peter Parker and Alicia Witt and Nikki Cox as Mary Jane and James Cameron was at one point. He wrote a treatment and he was attached to direct it. And the movie was in such development hell because so many studios claimed that they owned the rights to Spider-Man, that Marvel had gave so many studios different rights. And then this studio thought they actually had the rights to the character. And Sony and all these other studios were in such a long, sluggish dogfight of a lawsuit. And I remember when they announced it that Sony had won the lawsuit and the rights had went to them, that they immediately went into production with it and went to find a director. And when they got Sam Raimi, us fanboys were kind of, excited because we knew Sam Raimi from his Evil Dead movies. Sure. And he was a cult classic type of director. And a lot of people were apprehensive about him because, like we said, he had not directed a major franchise. But Spider-Man is rightfully or wrongfully considered the first big tentpole superhero movie, even before X-Men. X-Men that came out, but it was a solid hit. Spider-Man smashed box office records. It was the movie that brought
opening weekend was one of the first to ever gross 100 million.
Yes.
set tons of records for biggest opening day, biggest single day. I remember you could not go anywhere and not see Spider-Man. He was everywhere.
It was all over the place. It was, and it's to this day, I still think it's one of the top 3 or 4 grossing movies of all time. It was a huge 6 critically. It was a huge hit financially.
And for a lot of reasons. You think like they have Sam Raimi, who was able to pull off the feel of Spider-Man. I want to see a Spider-Man that's swinging through a city. And I remember in some of the first trailers, the teasers, where they would show Spider-Man swinging, and you're just like, wow, that's it. They got it. They, in a modern day city, they were able to pull off a character swinging through, and it feels right. It feels like he's, this small speck moving through these large buildings, and he's got the movements of Spider-Man and the poses. They always talk about, the Spider-Man in his posing, especially when Todd McFarlane was working on the comic, and how he would do these kind of exaggerated fingers and everything. And you saw a little bit of that as they were starting to kind of, develop the look of what Spider-Man would be in a movie.
I mean, I think you can all attribute that to Sam Raimi, because this goes to the long line of maybe what we talked about. I think we talked about in another podcast about getting a director who had a passion for the project. I mean, Sam Raimi was a Spider-Man fan. He grew up loving Spider-Man. He was a big Spider-Man fan. Sam Raimi was not a big-time director at the time, but he ended up selling Marvel on his vision of Spider-Man because of his passion for the character. He knew this character inside and out. This was a childhood hero of his growing up, so he knew what fans wanted because he knew what he wanted in a Spider-Man movie. So he put everything that he wanted to see in a Spider-Man movie, and guess what? It turned out to be a hit movie. And if you think about it, it was the precursor to the direction that Marvel's going today, because years later, when, we'll probably get to this, when Marvel started picking their other directors, they didn't go for the flashy guy. They didn't go with the guy who had it didn't matter if the guy had experience or not. Could you tell us the story? Could you sell us on who the character was? And that's what Sam Raimi did. And Marvel has kind of followed that blueprint all along. Maybe not going for the flashy director, maybe not going for the director who had the biggest pedigree, but going for the guy who loved the character, loved the story, and could tell a great story with that character. And I think that's what Sam Raimi did with that first Spider-Man movie. And I think why it's still to this day it hits a lot of people in the heart, because of the heart that Sam Raimi had for that character.
Good directing, good acting.
Good acting.
Good casting, rather. Tobey Maguire.
Solid casting, yes.
Perfect as Peter Parker.
Perfect.
Sympathetic.
Peter Parker.
When he gets bitten and he becomes a Spider-Man, you feel like you get the transformation. I mean, come on, the scene where Uncle Ben dies.
Yes.
I mean, that's just heartbreaking, and it gets across the feeling that I'm sure Sam Raimi wanted, that was originally the comics, the sentiment, the delivery. With great lines comes great responsibility. We as fanboys know that line, we can kind of say it, but they gave weight to that line so that other people could see where that line came to be.
Yeah. Tobey Maguire really brought a lot of, like I said, we're probably going to keep repeating this. A lot of themes that Marvel movies have repeated since then is getting an actor first in the character sector. They didn't cast Spider-Man. Anybody could be Spider-Man. You put the suit on, you're Spider-Man. They cast Peter Parker. Because 90% of this movie, you're going to see Peter Parker in this movie. So let's get an actor who you would be likable and you would like to see outside the costume, who could be cool inside the costume. And that became Marvel's sort of trope ever since, to get the actor who could play the alter ego, and then we'll worry about the ego later. And Tobey Maguire really brought a lot of humanity and likability. He wasn't the nerd like Christopher Reeve's Clark Kent was, but he still was nerdy and awkward.
You could identify with him.
You could identify with him.
He was a kid that was awkward, that had bullies, that wanted the cute girl, and it's just like, yeah, I get it.
And he had the Charlie Brown complex where he would fall, die trying, as Goblin told him, but he wouldn't quit and he would keep fighting it. And Tobey Maguire pulled that off in the movie great.
How many times did you see it in the theater?
I only saw it once in the theater. I saw it one time with my brother. I went downtown and I saw it with Sandro, a friend of ours, and we went to go see it together. And we came out the theater going, "Wow, they knocked it out of the park. This was great. It was action packed. It really had a lot of heart in it. And like you said, the cast did a great job, from Tobey Maguire to Uncle Ben and Aunt May. I think the two actors who don't get enough credit, who I think did a good job, was of course Willem Dafoe was a perfect choice as the Green Goblin.
Yes.
He actually looked like he enjoyed playing the villain. He did eat up some scenery playing Green Goblin, but he didn't do it in a way that was like roll your eyes. The Goblin is an over-the-top character anyway, but he had a little restraint with his Green Goblin, and Willem Dafoe looks like a villain anyway.
Absolutely.
So he brought a lot of good funness and creepiness to the character of Norman Osborn and the Green Goblin. Horrible costume. But still, he brought the villain out in that villain. And I think, to me, one of the characters that don't get a lot of credit is Kirsten Dunst's Mary Jane. I got in a lot of disputes about Mary Jane because a lot of people just wanted a real hot redhead. Because Mary Jane was always this really sexy redheaded girl, sort of like Charlie Brown, the redheaded girl who's just out of Spider-Man's league. And she's an actress, she's a model, and she's supposed to be one of those characters. In the books, she's always like, why is she dating Peter if he's such a nerd?
In the comics, you feel like she's a little bit one-sided.
Yes.
And then when you look at Gwen Stacy, she seems like she's more of a peer, like an equal to Peter. So when you have Kirsten Dunst, who, I mean, she's pretty and all.
Yes.
But it's more of a natural
down to earth
girl next door beauty, instead of just saying, you know what, let's go cast a very attractive runway model that happens to be redheaded, or if not, she can dye her hair, and then that will be the girl that knocks on his door and says you hit the jackpot.
That was always
when it's Kirsten Dunst, you feel like it's the girl down the street that is very much, like you said, down to earth. That was
always my problems with Spider-Man and with Superman in the movies. I never could understand why somebody who grew up on a farm and who was down to earth type of guy like Superman would like Lois Lane, who was like rude and pushy, and they never really tried to pull that out of her character. And when I heard they were going to do Mary Jane, I was like, I hope they don't make her just vain and she wants to party, because she was a party girl back in the 70s and 60s. She was the party girl, where Gwen Stacy was the more likable one. So nobody could really understand, other than the fact that Mary Jane was pretty, why that Peter fell for her. And it felt kind of wrong for a character like Peter, who has so much substance, to just be like attracted to somebody just because she's pretty. So I think Sam Raimi was smart to kind of combine Gwen Stacy and Mary Jane into the Mary Jane in his movie, and make Kirsten Dunst somebody very likable. And you can see why she doesn't treat Peter. I mean, she doesn't treat Peter Parker down. She doesn't look down on him like, oh, why are you talking to me? She talks to Peter just like he's a Rick. Just like she talked to Peter the same way she would talk to the high school football captain. So I think Kirsten Dunst does get a lot of credit for her performance in the first Spider-Man, but it was something I was very happy that the direction that Sam Raimi took the character in.
Speaking of characters that have taken very different directions, in 2003, a year after Spider-Man and Blade 2 are released, we see Daredevil. Now, this isn't the Daredevil that we've seen released in Netflix, now on its second season. This is a Daredevil released by Fox, very much, again, a product of its time.
90s, straight up 90s superhero character.
Starring Ben Affleck. And
Batfleck,
yes, now Batfleck. And his wife, or maybe not, I don't know. Future wife, yes, Jennifer Garner. But Daredevil, again, product of its time. It's gritty, it's dark, or at least it tries to be gritty and dark.
I think I actually like the Daredevil movie. I think they got a lot of stuff right. They didn't get enough right to say for me to go out and fight for the movie. Like if somebody said they didn't like the movie, I wouldn't say, hey, you're wrong. This movie had this. It was a lot of stuff they got right with the movie. I love the opening intro of the movie with Ben Affleck. When he goes to the bar and takes down the guy named Casada. It was pretty funny. And the part with the guy on the train. And there was some scenes here and there where they got a lot of stuff right. But the 90s tone, the 90s action tone and stuff in there kind of got in the way. They're kind of clunky. I thought Michael Clark Duncan's casting as Kingpin was actually a brilliant stroke.
Absolutely.
I don't know of any other actor at that time who could play Kingpin. He had the size. He had, and here's the thing. He had the size and he had the acting chops. He wasn't just a big guy. Michael Clark Duncan
he had the presence.
He was an Academy Award nominated actor, so he wasn't just a big muscle guy. And I thought that he was a great casting. He looked like Kingpin would look like to me. I didn't have a problem with him being African American because usually I'm a person who's like, this character is this color in this book, or this character is this gender in this book, and this character has to be just like this. And I heard Michael Clark Duncan's like, well, who else are you going to get? He's big, he's smart, he's intimidating, he's forceful, and I liked him. And I think Jennifer Garner was fine as Elektra. I think they could have did more with I don't blame her for the role. I blame more of the director not being able to do anything with her, but she was fine. And Colin Farrell chewed up a lot of scenery as Bullseye.
Bullseye?
Yeah, he had a lot of fun chewing up. I like the branding Bullseye on his forehead. Actually, was pretty cool because I was wondering what they're going to do. Are they going to give him the suit? But putting a branding on his head, saying he's crazy enough to do something like that.
Although his tinfoil jacket was pretty bad.
It was like I said. I'm not going to defend the movie. I'm going to say
the part on the plane where he hits the peanut and it goes into the woman that's sitting next to him into her mouth, and she essentially dies from choking.
Again, I am not going to defend this movie to anybody who wants to criticize it. For my personal taste, I have a lot of guilty pleasures. This happens to be a guilty pleasure movie for me. I didn't think it was great, but I didn't think it was horrible.
So it wasn't horrible.
It wasn't horrible. I didn't think it was great. I think it was amazing. I liked the movie. I was satisfied with it. A lot of people may be angry with me for saying this. I actually saw a lot of parallels with this movie and the original X-Men movie, which they got a lot of things right in the first X-Men movie, but there was a lot of things like we talked about, Halle Berry and her hair, and the last battle inside the skull of the Statue of Liberty was kind of like, looking at it now, you kind of go, but at the time we went with it. And the teeter-totter fight scene in Daredevil was just as silly as the fight scene in the skull of the Statue of Liberty. They could have had the fight on a Liberty Island. They didn't have to have it inside the actual skull of the Statue of Liberty. So I thought if they got a sequel to that Daredevil movie with Ben Affleck, maybe they can go a little darker tone. Maybe they could fix it. The movie actually was a success. It made a lot of money. It was a huge success.
Critically, no. Financially, yes.
Financially, it was a success. So I thought that maybe they would do the sequel and get that more R-rated tone that the movie needed. But
even I haven't actually seen it, but I know there's the alternate cut where they have Fantastic Ride, the actor, he was an actor in it, but he was a rapper, Coolio, thank you, where he plays, is it a police officer? No,
he plays a gang member who I think he works for Kingpin, and he's a gang member, and he was trying to help Daredevil close a case with Kingpin, I guess, being attached to it. His part was stupid. But there was some scenes in there that were actually more gritty. Like there was a part where Daredevil went to a church to pray, and his mother was a nun there. And if anybody read the book, they'd know that Daredevil's mother abandoned him as a child and became a nun because of her. She was an alcoholic. She was criminal, and she left and became a nun. But she actually watched over him. So it was a cool scene to see him at the church and see the sister in the background, pray for him and find out that it was his mother. There was some little touches here and there that made the movie a little bit darker, but it still was the same movie. If you didn't like it before, I don't think the 90s cut will change your mind and make, okay, all this stuff made a lot more sense. So
and you got to think, so Daredevil was released in 2002, and the current version of Daredevil that we know, the Netflix version, when they initially started talking about the production, they were saying how they were going to try to make it very similar in tone to The Wire.
Yes.
The Wire came out in 2002 on HBO, and Daredevil comes out a year afterwards. So so they were attempting to do gritty for that time.
Yes.
But they didn't know Wire gritty.
Yes.
They didn't have that touchstone to say, we want something that's gritty. Gritty like what? I mean, you're not talking, I remember Homicide: Life on the Streets. Mm-hmm. And to me, that was a gritty cop show compared to like NYPD Blue or some of those, something Homicide, Hill Street Blues, if you're really going back, or more campy shows like TJ Hooker or Chips and all that. Mm-hmm. But when you talk about like Homicide: Life on the Streets, it's, it was a more like, I don't know, just like a washed out version of a cop detective type procedural. Mm-hmm. So you had these flashy superhero movies like Spiderman and X-Men that were now starting to kind of become popular. Mm-hmm. And Daredevil was more of the street level hero, kind of like Blade. Blade just had the supernatural aspect to it, but Daredevil was there. And you just wonder if, someone's watching The Wire and thinking, oh, all right, this is what Daredevil should be, and then give it about another 10 years to kind of gestate, and now we get the Netflix Daredevil version. That is kind of what the Wire would be if there were superheroes in it.
Exactly. So I mean, the Daredevil movie gets a lot of flap from fans and stuff like that. And I'm not gonna, like I said, I'm not gonna defend it. But for me, I thought they got some things right in the movie, and I thought if it got a second chance to do a sequel, maybe with a different director, maybe with not Mark Steven Johnson, maybe with somebody else, it would have been a better chance to get that grittier tone that people would have liked. I mean, like I said, the movie was a hit, so people went to see it and saw it. And some people did end up liking it, and it does get like a lot of people have mixed. I know a couple of people that actually like that movie, and a couple of people that hate that movie. So it has a mixed fan base. So if they got a sequel, they may have been able to get that Daredevil TV series, Netflix TV series tone with a sequel. But alas, we will never find out.
No. And speaking of Mark Steven Johnson, he would go on to direct another movie in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. That's Ghost Rider. But we're going to leave that for part 2 of our discussion of the Marvel cinematic history, because right now we're only in 2002 and we still have the big guys to come, which includes everything from Hulk, Elektra, let's not forget that, Spider-Man 3, we have Iron Man, and everything that is now kind of like become
the current
big, the current Marvel series. So make sure to check out the second part. Hopefully you've enjoyed this. And remember, we'll be back with an entire episode dedicated strictly to the Daywalker, the first Blade movie. So we're looking forward to that one. Hopefully you guys are too. And that's the end of this episode. Tune in next time for more fan-to-fan conversations on the Fan2Fan Podcast. Thanks for listening. Find us on fanpodcast.com, on Facebook, at Fan2Fan Podcast on Twitter, and on your favorite podcast listening app. Till next time.
Don't be alarmed, gentlemen. The effects of the paralysis ray gun will wear off in a short time.